The End of Oil, page 149 in your textbook. Okay, The End of Oil, page 149, focus on IELTS. All right, there's going to be a conversation between a student called Andrew and his tutor, and they talked about an assignment. Okay, so the first part is question number 1 to 6. Okay, so have a look here. Andrew's tutor, oh sorry, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to fill in the gap. No more than 3 words. Okay. So Andrew's tutor thinks he can achieve a blank. A what? Okay. A prize or scholarship or whatever. He can achieve a blank if he maintains his progress. Okay. And his tutor advises him to avoid the subject or something. Don't do it. Avoid it. Okay. The subject of what? And the assignment needs to be blank words long. So how long? Okay, it's got to be a number. And number 4 to 6, label the pie chart, right? No more than 3 words for each answer. Number 4 is that green thing. It's like about 25% or a quarter. And number 5 is that pink thing. So it's about a third, okay? And that white thing is also another a third, okay? 4, 5, and 6. You've got to get the answers in the correct order. Don't forget, this is about a quarter or 25%. This is about a third or 35%. This is also another a third or 35%, okay? So now let me play the audio.
Unit 18. Focus on listening to The End of Oil. Section 3. In this section, you'll hear a tutorial discussion between a student called Andrew and his tutor. In the first part, they talk about Andrew's progress and his preparation for an assignment on the subject of oil. First, look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen to the first part of the discussion and answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, as I say, Andrew, we were a bit worried about your progress last term, but you've done some very good work recently, and I think it's fairly safe to assume you'll pass the course now. In fact, if you can keep up this standard, we could very well be looking at a credit.
A credit? Really?
Yes, as long as you keep up the good work. It's a real pity about last term, because you could have got a distinction if you'd really wanted to, you know. Anyway, the other thing we need to talk about is your next assignment, right?
Right.
And you wanted to look at the subject of oil.
Yes, it's a pretty major issue. I mean, there are millions of buses and cars and trucks in the world, all dependent on oil, and then the airline industry is carrying more and more people around the world every year. So you have to consider global warming.
Hang on a minute. I wouldn't go into global warming if I were you. That's a huge subject in its own right, and quite a controversial one, I might add. The assignment is only supposed to be 3,000 words, remember? If you're not careful, you'll be writing a 30,000-word thesis.
Okay.
Don't be too ambitious, and keep an eye on the number of words. You've got a word count on your computer, haven't you?
Yes.
Good. Now, let's start with a few basics. Do you know how much energy is actually used for fuel compared with other things?
Yes, I found a breakdown. It's here somewhere. Ah, yes. Transportation. Now, that accounts for about a quarter of world energy. Quite a bit less than industry, but it's still a significant proportion.
And what is the figure for industry as a matter of interest?
Now, that's almost 45%.
And the rest?
Well, the other 30% or so goes into buildings, for things like heating and air conditioning, etc. But anyway, the main point I wanted to make was that we can't go on relying on oil forever.
In the second part of the discussion, Andrew and his tutor go on to examine the problem further. Look at questions 7 to 10 first.
Okay, so now let's listen out for question numbers 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so question 7 to 9. Okay, so in question 7, 8, and 9, you have to take the countries. Okay, which countries are producing less oil now in the past? Now it's already producing less. Okay, so you have to take the countries, anything more or anything less, then the correct answer will result in a 0. You've got to get the exact number of the countries that are already producing less now than in the past. And number 8, which countries use the most gasoline per head? Again, you have to get all the correct answer. Anything less or anything more will result in your losing mark of this number. And number 9, which countries are increasing their gasoline use most rapidly? That they're using more and more gasoline very, very fast. Which countries? Again, you've got to get the correct answer. Anything more or less will result in 0. And finally, number 10 here, what solution does Andrew favor? Okay, Andrew is not the tutor, okay? Andrew's favor finding the new sources of oil somewhere else on the world, or developing an alternative to oil, something else to replace the oil. And number C, imposing taxes on the use of oil. Okay, so now let's listen to them. Let's listen to number 7, 8, 9 first, and we'll get to number 10. Okay, so let's go for it.
As you listen to the discussion, answer questions 7 to 10.
So, Andrew, you think oil is running out. Have you any evidence of that?
Yes, and it's quite frightening. Apparently, nowadays, oil companies are only finding 1 barrel of oil for every 4 we actually use. Britain's North Sea oil is just about at its peak now. It'll start to decline pretty soon. And several major oil producers are already producing less.
For example?
Well, the former Soviet Union is a good example, and Mexico is another. Apparently, even Saudi Arabia will reach its peak in a few more years.
Interesting. Okay, and do you know which countries use the most oil?
Yes. 1/3 of all the world's oil goes to North America. Worst of all is the USA, which gets through 459 gallons of gasoline per head every year. And Canada isn't far behind, with 303 gallons. Quite a long way after that comes Germany, and then Japan.
All fairly predictable, I suppose.
But the thing is, there are other countries catching up fast, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. The 2 fastest growing are South Korea, which has doubled its use of gasoline in 10 years, and India, which is up 64% in the same period.
Good. That's all very useful data. Now, I suppose the other thing you need to look at is possible solutions. Any ideas?
I haven't really got that far yet.
Okay, well, it comes down to 2 or 3 things, doesn't it? Persuading people to use less oil.
By putting a tax on it, you mean? But that can penalise the poor.
Or discovering new oil reserves somewhere in the world.
Unlikely. And even that would only be a stopgap. No, I think the only realistic long-term answer is to find a replacement for oil. I've seen hydrogen mentioned as a likely candidate.
Okay, well, I think we'd better leave it there. You seem to have a lot of useful information already, and you just need to work out the last section. And don't forget the word limit.
I won't. Thanks for the help.
That is the end of the section. You now have half a minute to check your